There we go. Yeah, so welcome everyone to our April meetup, and we're very happy to welcome Evan from Power On, talking about some of the tools there. So I personally I used Power Update in the past. I think that's also still around, but today it's really more about the Writeback functionality, planning functionality. So supercharging Power BI as we called it. And so Evan, stage is yours. Questions, keep them coming in the chat. So we will answer them during the session or at the end in a Q&A.
Absolutely. Thank you, Chris. So if you can see my screen here, I started sharing. This is what I planned as far as the agenda today. We'll start with a quick introduction of myself as well as Power On as a company, and kind of lay the foundation for how we exist within the Microsoft ecosystem and some of the key capabilities and use cases that our toolset offers. And then we'll spend the vast majority of today's meeting within the demo environment today. We'll first start with a basic overview of the custom visuals that are included within the Visual Planner suite. We call that Visual Planner 101. So also going to lay the foundation for the different things that are possible within Power BI when adding our custom visuals. And then we'll move into the art of the possible, which is different, varying applications for planning and budgeting, both amongst finance and FP&A, as well as sales and operations, and different types of custom applications to give you a good feel for what some finished examples of applications using our tool set looks like. And we expect questions to be coming in throughout the chat bar throughout the meeting. So I'll take a couple pauses throughout the presentation to answer those as we go. But we'll, of course, save some time at the end of today's session to cover any other questions that haven't been answered to that point. So with that said, I'll get things started. As Chris had mentioned, Power On is going to be the company that I'm representing today, and we are a Microsoft ISV, so an independent software vendor, and that means that we provide some add-on products for the Power Platform. What we're going to be focusing in on today with the Power BI crowd is our Power BI add-in that at a very high level turns Power BI into a two-way street rather than just a way of visualizing data. So that really unlocks a lot more use cases and capabilities within an already strong platform, and looking forward to showcasing those at length today. And then as far as myself, my name is Evan Friel. I am the Manager of Business Development here at Power On. So I spend a lot of my time on pre-sales activity, doing demos, discovery sessions, and I'm involved throughout proof of concepts. I joined this company about 2 years ago, a little bit more than 2 years ago at this point, and had previously worked at some other large enterprise software vendors. Saw what we were doing over at Power On, thought it was really cool from a technical capability standpoint, and also really liked the ease of adoption and being able to pick up this tool quickly and easily if you're already familiar with Power BI and the underlying Microsoft BI stack. So decided it was something I want to be a part of. I've had a lot of fun in the last 2 years talking with different customers and people about this type of thing. So next, really just want to go over the goal of our organization, this product, and my role within the company is, of course, to solve problems. So the problem that we see most frequently is many organizations have come a long way as far as building out a more modern data architecture and visualizing that effectively with a front-end tool like Power BI. That being said, there is quite a bit of reports and data and intelligence that we'd like to visualize that does require some degree of end user input, whether that is simplistically adding a comment to a report to explain a variance or your assumption, or making basic status updates, to many types of planning, which a lot of times are completely driven by end user inputs for forecasts, budgets, scenario planning, so on and so forth. So while you can automate the reporting from your different source systems and databases into Power BI, whenever it's time to take action on that data or add some human insight to that, it has to take place elsewhere, which typically is done in spreadsheets, sometimes using VBA code or custom applications. And it's typically a little bit slower, more manual, just not an ideal experience for end users, and can take up a good amount of time on lower value activity. So what we look to accomplish is, of course, turning that on its head by making those interactions possible directly within your reporting platform, making those updates more fast and proactive in real time, of course, automating and governing what can be automated and governed about the processes, and doing a better job of integrating the systems and the people that work amongst them so they can spend more and more of their day on higher value add activity like true analysis. So the way we accomplish that goal is through our suite of add-on products. As I mentioned, we're a Microsoft ISV partner. We have a couple different add-on products, and Chris even mentioned Power Update, which is the first product that we ever worked with. But today we are going to be focusing in on Visual Planner, given everybody here is mostly interested in Power BI. And as I mentioned earlier, this is a suite of 4 custom visuals along with a Writeback engine that are going to enable data entry, budgeting and forecasting of any kind, goal seeking, what if scenarios, driver-based modeling, commentary, so on and so forth, which we'll dive into here in just a moment. Before doing so, just want to touch on some of the key differentiators that make this product unique and also are going to enable a lot of the different use cases that you see today. As I already mentioned, we're an ISV partner, but we have a very tight-knit software development relationship with the Microsoft Power BI product team. So they actually retrust and republish our visuals on their servers each and every month as they're bringing out new point releases. Good news for anybody that wants to use these visuals is you don't have to worry about them malfunctioning whenever there's a point release or taking a long time to get a bug fix. Because of that tight relationship we have with Microsoft, we are able to handle the maintenance and testing side of things ahead of time, so your team doesn't have to worry about any change management. Another good part about our tool is it's just as secure as any of our customers' internal environment already is, because what we do at the end of the day is create a two-way connection between 2 pieces of technology that are typically already approved and exist within a business technical environment, and that's going to be a database and Power BI. So we don't take or store data for any reason. We merely give folks the tools that they need to turn Power BI into that two-way street. Next is machine learning. Many groups are looking to incorporate R and Python throughout their planning processes. That's another very interesting use case for our tool, is you can equip end users with the ability to recall R or Python scripts on their historical data to pre-populate a forecasting template, and then go through and add any necessary human insights or make adjustments based on things they think that AI might not be accounting for, all directly from a Power BI report. And then last but not least, our biggest differentiator, I would say personally, is that we're the only company in the world that allows for real-time updates to tabular models directly from Power BI reports. So specifically when you talk about planning, budgeting, and forecasting, if you're familiar with any traditional tools in that space like Hyperion, BPC, TM1, they all typically rely on a multi-dimensional database to be that semantic layer, the OLAP layer added to your transactional data to make sense of it properly. And tabular is kind of like the next evolution of multi-dimensional, and it's the native analytical layer to Power BI. So whenever you use a Power BI premium data set, you are leveraging tabular, whether you know it or not. So because we're able to interact and make real-time updates to that tabular model, that's what's going to enable all of the different use cases that you see today. And another important part about that differentiator is when our Writeback engine performs a save back to a database, it also simultaneously reprocesses only the affected tables in your tabular model, which allows you to see those updates in real time with good performance, and also allows you to bypass the daily refresh limitations of Power BI. So when you make an update, you don't have to wait for the next scheduled refresh. You'll see it as soon as that save is complete. And then here's the last slide I'll touch on. Just like Power BI, with Visual Planner and our toolset being an extension of Power BI, it's not only helpful to a certain department, company size, industry. Really, anybody that is leveraging Power BI today is going to find additional value in being able to collect inputs from end users, whether that's something simplistic like commentary or more sophisticated like budgeting, scenario planning, whatever that may be. But it can really be seen as a Swiss Army knife that can be used to eliminate manual processes across the enterprise, whether that is amongst finance teams or sales and operational teams, and all in all, helping organizations have to go to less and less places throughout the day to accomplish their jobs. So as I mentioned, that's all I wanted to cover as far as an introductory PowerPoint perspective. I want to spend as much time as possible within the demo environment. I will take a quick pause. I'm not sure if any questions have been collected quite yet.
No questions so far, no.
Fantastic. So we'll get into the good stuff here. And as I mentioned, we will start with Visual Planner 101. So I'll do a basic overview of the 4 custom visuals, and then we will get into some more finished examples. So the first one we'll start with is one of our most popular custom visuals, and it is called the data entry matrix. So that's what I'm clicked on right here. As you can see, I'm working directly within Power BI service. This is not an embedded application or something separate that I would have to sign into. And if I pop open the development pane, I can show you what it looks like as far as being able to develop a Writeback enabled report. So if you're familiar with doing front-end development within Power BI, you have your different fields that from your various data sources, and then you have Power BI's visualizations to choose the best way to present that data. One of the most commonly used visuals is a matrix, which is essentially like a pivot table within Power BI. So you drag from your fields what you would like presented in rows, columns, and values, and then it is presented over here. You can make it look a little bit more visually appealing than this, and you can use some basic drill down capabilities. But all in all, that's ultimately where the functionality is going to stop. It is just a presentation layer. So in the case that I see a value that I feel is outdated or incorrect, I'm not able to update here. I either have to follow the data back to the source or export to Excel in order to do so. Same thing goes if I want to leave a comment to explain a variance or my assumptions about a certain figure. And I certainly can't figure out what the rest of this grid would have to look like if I want to do 450 million in sales volume rather than 439 million. So that is really where our product comes into the mix when there is a need for that type of thing. You can do a one-for-one swap of any existing matrix within your report. And just like that, that could become a Writeback enabled report. You can also develop them from scratch, much in the same way that you would with standard visuals. So again, not a huge learning curve here to learn how to incorporate data entry within the platform. For example, if I want end users to enter data at the brand and product level, as well as the customer group, I can drag on that new field and my input screen here will update. And we'll take a glimpse into what's taking place under the hood here. So you'll now have a data entry field under the formatting pane for this custom visual. And this is where you'd establish a connection with the backend Writeback component. So it is a web service. It can either be installed completely on-premise with Power BI Report Server or with a data gateway or completely in the cloud with Azure. In any case, you'll establish a connection here once that's installed in your environment, and then you can choose from your various different data sources that you'd like to be able to write back to. So that's an overview of what it looks like as far as being a developer. As a business user, an end user of these reports, you would access your report, and it would behave much like a standard Power BI report, of course, but now we'll be able to update data as well as have it visualized. So as this loads up, we'll see that I'll be able to make updates to this data at any level of granularity that is visualized within the report. And we can pop into full screen here. And before I start making any changes, I want to point out that we work in versions of data. So at the top right, you can see I have a tab for actual, we have a budget, a forecast, a target. All of these versions are going to have the same structure. So the same rows and columns that we're able to enter data for, but they're going to be populated with different information based on the inputs. And actuals are always going to remain read-only. So that's one thing that you talk about adding Writeback to reporting. Some people get a little nervous, which is understandable, but we're never going to update source or record data for any reason, but we can create and manage as many versions of this data as we would like to directly from the front end, which I will get into in a little bit. But first and foremost, let's go through some of the basic interactions and start performing our first couple Writebacks. So as you can see, I can make updates at lower levels of granularity. If I want to take an individual product SKUs total for a given month from 4.5 to, let's just say, 6 million. Over that value, hit Save Changes. The Writeback engine, that web service that I showed you, is then going to translate that end user input into the necessary database statements, reprocess, the selected tables in the tab of the model, and our Power BI report will refresh in an average of about 2 seconds. You can also do so at aggregate level totals. So this 34 million figure is looking at 3 months rolling up into Q1, 2 products rolling up into Apple brand. So if I want to just change this from 34.5 to 40 million, same thing goes, I'll type over that. Before I hit save changes in this case, you can take a look at the pre-existing values before I commit that change. We can see in February and March, for example, the Apple can is heavily outperforming the Apple bottle. So when I hit save changes, the way it works out of the box is it will maintain any weighted percentages, but increase or decrease to get us there. So we can see the can took on a bigger brunt because it was already doing more of the work prior, but everything has increased to get us to that new total. So we have those basic overrides, and then we also have smart formulas, which are some simple text-based formulas. If you want to increase, decrease, multiply, or divide any value by quantity or by percentage, you can simply use the first 3 letters of that word. For the April total, I'll type in INC, 10%, and then hit enter, and it'll just do the math for me in that case. And then another commonly used smart formula is the ability to do even spreading. So if I would like to, I can use a capital E to have an allocation spread evenly across the different columns that would go across. One moment, I am going to give this report a quick refresh. And right there, I just hopped off the camera. I think having a little bit of a bandwidth issue there, but this should be better now as this report loads up. So as I mentioned, we're going to go over the even spreading smart formula, and then we'll get into commentary and goal seeking within the matrix as well. So as I mentioned, we can see in this example, our orange 1-liter bottle has a pretty heavily skewed spread here. So if I would like to evenly spread these 3 million units, I can do a capital E, 3 million. And then I will get 1 million for each of the months adding up to Q1 for that product. So meant to be very Excel-like. We want users with the familiar interface here and the ability to get in and out of their data input tasks. And with that, you can probably notice the bright red triangles that are populating some of these cells. So if I hover over one of those, it indicates that someone has left a comment at that data point. In this example, I can see that Michael Murata has come in and explained a variance. We are down 10% because 2 stores closed in Dallas. So anywhere where I would like to leave a context or assumption or my thought process, I can simply select that cell, come up to the comment bar here, and then explain because of XYZ. Hit enter, and then anybody else viewing this report will now have that available there within the tooltip if they hover over the figure. Now these comments actually live at the row and column intersection within our data model on the back end. So if I were to drill down into Chris Walker here, who is a regional vice president in this example, we're going to be at new row and column intersections, and that means we're going to have a different set of comments here. This is also a good example of what a role-based experience might look like. If Chris is a regional vice president, he doesn't need to edit Ben, Helen, or Mary's data, but he should be able to do so for his slice of the pie, and he can work at the same time as his colleagues within the same data model and the same version of data without anybody overlapping their data input. So another comment here, we can see Chris has been asked to increase his total for the year by 1 million units. If he wants to, he can continue to use the drill down capabilities of Power BI to go down to a specific customer or brand where he feels confident he can sell another 1 million units, and come down here, INC 1 million. And now that 1 million unit increase will only allocate down across the values that made it through those filters. And as that save is committed, we can keep an eye on Chris Walker's standard bar chart right here. It'll pop up by 1 million from 59 to 60. And then when I remove all those filters anybody that's looking at this from a higher level view will see the latest and greatest as soon as somebody inputs their data and hits save changes, which is pretty simplistic to demo, but a lot of times each individual user is collecting their own data in an Excel spreadsheet, and then a lot of manual work goes into consolidating those, eventually getting them into a usable format for Power BI and being able to consume and make decisions based off of that data. And the last feature that we'll cover within the data entry matrix is the ability to goal seek. So we saw the proportionate breakbacks as well as smart formulas. And then if I would like to do a more selective allocation, I can do so using the goal seek. So let's say, for example, I am asked to increase my total for the year by 2 million units. And then if I'm looking down over some of these values, some of our products we don't see performing so well, whether these are based on actuals or our latest estimate. So instead, I might want to select 3 of our best-selling products for that period, hit set goal seek. Now these 3 values will become highlighted, letting us and the tool know these are the only values that will be impacted by my next update. And I can put in that goal of increasing by 2 million units. Hit save changes, and you can keep an eye on those 3 values. They will increase to get us that new goal. The rest will remain static here. So that is a data entry matrix. Again, whenever replacing an Excel-based process, a very commonly used visual. Next, we'll move on to our second custom visual that we'll cover today. And that has actually been on your screen this whole time. Whenever you see a Save Changes button, that is a telltale sign that Power On is involved. So in this case, we are looking at a line chart where we have enabled some drag and drop changes. And each of these dots is showing us the percentage of annual sales that we predicted to take place in each month. So it is matching up and based on the data within the matrix. So if I want to perform a what if scenario, it might be a little bit quicker and a little bit more fun to do so via drag and drop. I always use the example, like I said, I joined right around the time that the pandemic was occurring. So that was a very odd time for groups that were trying to plan, and the ability to create new scenarios based on how long we might have to close our doors or shut down some of our operations based on the pandemic, something that we didn't expect to occur, became quite valuable to groups or valuable to different companies. So now I'll account for a dip here in the spring months, and then figure out what the second half of the year will have to look like if we want to still get to this total that we laid out. So in this case, I've made my drag and drop changes. I hit save changes, and then we'll actually reallocate our entire plan for the year to mimic that trend. So at the bottom, corresponding values within the matrix, we can see January and February doing pretty well, and then it's going to start to drop off throughout those spring months, and it hits a valley in May, and then it will pick back up, and we can figure out, again, what the second half of the year has to look like if we still want to get to that total that we had laid out. So those are the first 2 custom visuals. Our third one is another drag and drop visual. So this is a bar chart rather than a line chart, and this tends to lend itself nicely to driver-based modeling. So this is an example used by a professional services company, and they wanted to be able to manipulate values for things like hours and billing rate and utilization percentage, and then see the impact on their profitability. So up top, we have a standard Power BI visual and measure that shows us our variance to forecast profitability. Down here, as a business user, I might not be very technical, but I have the acumen to say, maybe if we level out these hours, we can eliminate some unnecessary overtime, whatever that may be, create different scenarios, and then use the real-time update of the data model and this calculation, which takes hours into account, to see if the changes I made would make us more or less profitable. So getting that real-time decision support, again, all the measures, the data modeling is done by Power BI. We just allow people to update those values in real time. And then last but not least, we'll touch on the fourth custom visual that we'll focus in on today, and this is called the table editor. So much like the matrix, it is a one-for-one swap of the table visual. In this case, it doesn't require a data model. This is going to be for more transactional, row-by-row type of updates and custom applications. So here within the data entry field, you can see we are writing back directly to SQL rather than to an analysis services data source. And as a developer, I can now come through and I can define our column properties. So for each column, I'm going to be able to choose very easily whether it's going to be visible or hidden to end users, whether it will be read-only or editable via toggle. And if I do want it to be editable, I can control how via this drop-down list here. So if I want to get commentary from end users, I can say text. I can add numerical figures or updates to those. You can have them select from a calendar picker to update date or date and time. A selection box gives a list of finite options available via dropdown. You can have checkboxes, links to other sites or reports, the ability to tag a user, attach an image, or use search boxes. So if you have your data ready to go in a database of some sort, you can then put Power on top of that and quickly and easily develop some custom applications based off of that. So in this case, the first 4 columns are going to be read only, and then the customer column here is defined as a selection column type. So via dropdown, I can choose a different customer. As you can see, everything's governed. So while less technical people may be able to interact with the database, you can still set it up so that they can't mistype in the naming conventions and mess up the roll-up of that data. Same thing goes with changing the date. We can have that set up so it's formatted correctly, and you can select via the calendar picker. And then here we can even enable rich text commentary if you would like to. So as you can see, we have a numbered list, bold, italics, anything you can do from a formatting perspective of Microsoft Word, you can now incorporate when collecting commentary within reports. And then our quantity and price are, of course, numerically defined. So now if I come in and accidentally type a letter, it's going to flash red and let me know that doesn't match up with the column type. So I will have to type in an integer in this case if I want to be able to update that. Same thing goes, we'll hit save changes, and then our report will refresh and the underlying database will be updated. Now everything here and really within this visual is easily toggled on or off. So again, just showing the art of the possible here. If you would like end users to be able to do so, they can delete a record, take a copy of an existing record as a starting point for a new one, or insert brand new records. So this is pretty much like a walking, breathing insert, update, delete statement that can be used by different users. And then the last button on the right here is a form entry view. So if we want to collect data from users out in the field, a lot of times they won't like scrolling left to right on their cell phone, so they can have this form entry view to do so in a way that's a little bit more friendly for a handheld device. And then last out of the box feature that we'll cover here is this set all bar. So if I want to make some wholesale changes, just like with the matrix, we can use the standard visuals on a screen to filter down to a subset of our data. Here you can see everything here in the comment bar is marked as incomplete because I did that on a demo earlier today. So we'll do the opposite. And rather than going line item by line item across all these values, we can say complete. All right, so that was that'll conclude Visual Planner 101. We still have quite a few different examples and more sophisticated finished products to show you, but figure I can take a break there and see if there's been any questions added to the chat before proceeding.
Not so far. So
I think as long as I have the chance to ask, I
have
would
questions
ask
as well, but yeah.
anything. Yeah. What about, so you're showing it was quite impressive that you can even edit things in a drill down, but what is are the cells locked for this moment from changes from other users, or how do you handle ambiguity in this case? So when 2 users edit the same cell, I think it would be possible here, right? But what would you do then?
Right. So there's quite a few different ways to lock that down. We usually, when receiving that question, ask, is it ideal for end users to be able to update the same information, or should people only be updating the data that they're responsible for? So in some cases, of course, you might want, somebody a member of someone's team to be able to cover for the manager, for example. But in most cases, we are going to want to lock down who can update what. Like, for example, if I'm Evan Friel and I only manage the Northeast, I should only be able to update opportunities or sales forecast values for those that I'm responsible for the Northeast. So role level security is what's going to be used for that type of thing. So nothing proprietary about our product from the standpoint of security, but you can even use a table editor to update role level security from the front end if you would like to. So in that first example, I was working with product and brand. So here, if I drill down to product and brand, I can then use this search box that will populate here to search for individual employees, or you can have an Active Directory grouping dropdown. But here I have a made up employee in our demo database named VP after Visual Planner. As you can see, via checkbox, I can update his read and write access. So if I only want him to be able to edit tonic, but read everything else, this is how I would have that set up. So you can do so on a user basis or Active Directory grouping basis. And then you can also do so two versions of reports. So in the sake of planning, a lot of times once a forecast is submitted, for example, you might not want people to be able to edit that anymore. You just want to use it for historical and variance reporting purposes. So that can also be accomplished using the table editor. This is skipping ahead to one of the more finished examples. But you can see we have our different versions. We have our budgets, forecasts, actuals, and then we can say what the version type is, version status, and approval status. And then once it is set to approved, you can make that a read-only report.
Yeah,
and
that was also one of
then
the questions. Yeah.
It looks like somebody had asked if undo is possible. Yeah, so undo is something that whenever making updates before hitting save changes, so INC 10%, let's say, you can hit discard changes, which is essentially the undo button. So you can make as many updates as you'd like and then hit discard changes if you decide you don't want to add that. As far as undoing changes, a lot of times people are going to be concurrently working on this. So that does get a little bit more complicated. If I hit an undo for everything that happened in the last 5 minutes, I might reverse other people's work as well. So as I mentioned with the versioning technique here, which is just adding a version dimension to your data model. So we can have one fact table that houses many different versions. If I want to make some changes to a report that I'm not sure that I'm going to want to keep, you can always create a sandbox based off of any version of the report. So here, for example, insert, take a copy of any existing report as a starting point. And then here we'll add a Power BI user group, sandbox, or what if scenario, whatever you'd like to call it. Well, then we'll get a copy of that version that is going to be based off of it, of course, but it's not going to be connected to that in any way. So any changes that I make are only going to be specific to that version ID. So just created that version, scroll over to it, and now you can see I can make as many changes as I would like without impacting any other versions. And then if you like what you did here, you can also, change this or promote this to be a target or a version that you are going to use going forward. And then more than one comments to one cell, depending on the aggregation level. Yeah, so you can either have the latest comment persist, or you can have a full list of the comments that have been made at that data point. So this is one example where it's nicely laid out, at least the possibility to do so. So this is one example that's more of a custom application for a company that only wanted to do commentary. They didn't want to update any numerical figures for this use case. So another good thing about the comments added using our tool, that's a new reportable field within your database. But for example, I can see for this given report, we have 3 comments. So if I want to right click, drill through and edit, now if I hover over this figure, I can see there's quite a few icons. I can see it's flashing red based on the conditional formatting of the standard matrix visual here. If I hover over that, you can see a full audit log of different comments that have been made, comment statuses that have been assigned to those, as well as end users who made the update and who they would like to assign their comment to. So in this example, you can see someone comes in, says, please explain more details on this figure. Eventually, someone comes in and explains the reason was due to an unexpected maintenance cost, and then it is marked as approved after that. So you can also use us for commentary or status updates in conjunction with standard visuals. I've selected the cell that I would like to add a comment, and then the comment button brings up the Power On table editor. The rest is standard Power BI visuals.
From my side again, going back to the matrix-like visual you showed in the beginning with the possibility, yeah, correct, with the possibility to change things right in the cells. Is there a list of the commands that you use? So you showed this evenly distributed increase or percentage increase or something like this. Is there an overview of this somewhere?
Absolutely. And that is a good segue to introduce one of the more finished products. But so this is one example of a P&L planning report. As you can see, the Power BI bookmarks can be used to cater to a couple different functions and give it a nice application feel. So right here, we're on a landing page. And then if I go to the data input, we'll see we can enter data by revenue, cost of goods sold, expenses, occupancy, remuneration, so on and so forth. Similar to our first example where we have the data entry matrix and the drag and drop line chart. And then this customer decided that they are going to have a pop-up with page instructions. This is information that we give to any of our customers, but they had the bright idea of copy and pasting that into a Power BI bookmark. So on the same screen where end users are making these interactions, they can have reminders on how to use those different smart formulas, goal seeking capabilities, and entering comments.
Yeah, cool. Oh, that's exactly what I meant. Yeah, with the commands there. There's one more question regarding the comments. So example, what about Chris Walker commented the value of February 2022 for his profit center, and his colleague did the comment for the same period for his profit center. Which one is shown in the first visual?
Right. So in that case, so if we had no filters on, you actually by default wouldn't see any of those, either of those comments, because Chris Walker's would be down at his. And then, so with Chris Walker put on as a filter, he has his own set of row and column intersections over here. And then if his colleague did the same thing, even if it's at the same place, I'm not sure if Ben has any comments here. See, he has his own there. So they are stored at the tuple, the row and column intersections. So whenever those filters are applied, they don't necessarily by default roll up into the aggregate level view. But you can always, like I said, they're a new reportable field. So this is another example where we make our comments and numerical updates in the data entry matrix. And then I just want to see a summary of all the comments that have been made. So then you just have a standard Power BI table that is going to be looking at the comments that have been made on the data entry matrix. We can see when they were added, the user that added them, and then exactly where they were added and have them in a summarized view. And then like in this example, you can have a right click if you want to be able to drill through to that.
Yeah, thanks. I think that's all questions so far.
Fantastic. So as I mentioned, we were getting into some of the more finished examples there. So I'll continue to do so with a couple FP&A examples, as well as sales and operational planning, and then get into some custom applications. And of course, happy to continue to address any questions. So please feel free to keep them coming. But as I showed here, we have our comment log, and I was touching on the data entry matrix. Same thing goes if you have a certain division you want to plan by or filter by, or if a certain manager just wants to come in and plan for their data, they can use all these standard Power BI filtering in order to do so. You can see revenue, of course, is going to be financial figures. Cost of goods sold, on the other hand, is just going to be updating different percentages. So different users come in and they just have their own tab that they can work within to accomplish their task for the day. And then, of course, any information rolls up and impacts any dependent measures. So a good way to show that is with this what if analysis tab here. So the managers, different contributors to the planning process, in this case, they all benefit from being able to make those updates directly within reporting. And then leadership really likes the ability to think about things that are going outside of our business, maybe in the market as a whole, and perform some what if analysis based on that. So here we can see we have a working scenario and a target scenario available via dropdown. I'm going to compare our budget and our actuals. Then you can view the profitability and variance metrics associated with those. And then, like I said, think about what's going on maybe in the market or industry as a whole. We're able to collect and compare our data much more quickly. And now leadership can say, well, I think supply chain issues might continue to be a problem for the next couple of months. I want to see how that's going to impact my profitability. So quick drag and drop, increase the cost of goods sold, and then within a couple seconds, see how that's going to impact my gross profit. And then just like the comments, every change that is made using the product is going to be stored in an audit log. So that's another field that will be available to report on within your database. Here we'll see we have writeback history details. So just like any other visual, we can drag those on and then have a full history of all the changes that have been made using the visuals. So we can see down to the second user made the change, old and new values, and then the metadata lets us know where that took place within our data model. Lastly, we also have a little bit more sophisticated way of creating and managing our versions than just taking a copy of our previous version. So in this case, you'll see I'm going to be able to select two scenarios to combine. So I'll insert, and let's say we're doing a forecast, and I would like to be able to use our actuals so far for the months that have already occurred this year. So I'll do January through March. That'll populate the first 3 months of my grid. And then I want to do our original budget for the remaining months. So I'll do April through January, or December rather. And then I'll just do FY22 Q1 reforecast, whatever I like to say there. So just showing different ways of creating those versions. And like I showed in a previous example, you can manage the status, which can dictate read and write access associated with that version of the data. All right, I'll touch on one more FP&A example, mainly for the variance reporting aspect of this. And then I do see some more questions coming in, so we'll take a pause to look at those as well. But again, more finished application using the Power BI bookmarks to give it a modern feel for the different things that we want to accomplish throughout the day. So this group has a multi-tiered planning experience, doing so at the business unit, profit center, and project level. So just like all the other examples, we're going to have a data entry matrix for making these updates. So right here, it prompts me to make sure I select the correct business unit and version of data I want to make updates for. And then we have our handy data entry matrix to make these updates much in the same way that this group used to do so in Excel. But the best part of this report, in my opinion, is the ability to compare these versions. So this is actually going to leverage standard Power BI reporting capabilities. Nothing within this module here is editable with Power On. But we'll see we have those different versions that we have created and populated using Visual Planner. I can choose to compare, for example, my January and February versions of that forecast, and then have a pre-built dashboard here that is going to show me that side-by-side comparison, even with a red line here that is going to highlight where that version variance takes place. So let's say, for example, that I am tasked with approving this version, saying it's been checked, everything is correct, and it should be used going forward. And I might want to figure out why this peak took place. So I can then use the drill down capabilities of Power BI to see, all right, it took place in July. It looks like the biggest variance took place in a data subset. And I can see it's for about $195,000 in this case. So now within the same application, I can go back right to where that data was input, go to our profit center planning, The February version of that forecast is where that variance took place. And then I'm going to keep an eye on anything related to data analytics that looks a little off. And right off the bat, I see a pretty large figure, very close to the size of the variance that we identified on the previous screen. And I can see there's been a comment left here. And I can see we have received approval to add 500 licenses to a software subscription renewal, and that has been approved. So all in the same place, I can identify a variance and make sure that it was legitimate. And then I can go down and go to our February version of that forecast, switch it to approved since that was all checked, hit save changes, and then that's going to become a read-only version, which I can also show when we jump back to the same exact report. Now that I've just switched it to an approved version, we'll see a nice little note at the top. This version is approved, editing is restricted. So just getting a feel for all the different things that you can accomplish without having to run to several different systems and screens and different colleagues that you might have to contact when trying to resolve this type of thing. All right, I see quite a few questions, so I will start.
Yes, should I read it or?
I'm able to see them here. So I see Fernando asked, how's it managed planning?
Just read it loud for the YouTube
right.
audience that they also know it, but yeah.
Right. So the question is, how is it managed, the planning in a group of analysts where all have access to make changes to the budget or forecast, i.e. if one person makes a forecast for one line, but another changes an aggregation that includes it, the first change gets overridden by the second, correct? How would that be audited and restored to a previous version? So that's a good question. And I have a good example that I'm going to pull up on the side here, and then I will pull it over once it's loaded. But essentially, that's going to be defined by what the company's process should look like. So typically, a lot of groups will do just that. They'll start with a more bottom-up approach, and then ultimately, the higher levels in the organization might have the final say in that type of situation. So if I can bring this over, let's see, looks like we're good. So this is an example used by a very large company that replaced TM1 and over 100 different Excel templates with us. And this single report supports 1,500 different people, and they do just what you described. So they have planning at the product level, at the country level, and at the corporate level. So by business unit, by countries, or by the different products sold in specific countries and business units. So at the lowest level, the product level, people will input their data. They can choose to plan by local currency, US dollars, or quantity. But really the way they manage that is with the version statuses. So the last best estimate, each of the groups, the product levels, the country levels, and the corporate levels are all going to work in the same version of data, but we're going to have statuses that's going to control who has the right access there. So for example, during initial, all the end users would come in, all the people at the product level would come in and input data. And then halfway through that forecast period, it switches to under review, at which point only the corporate and the country level are able to put the final touches on that, make any last minute changes, and then it becomes finalized. So you can incorporate workflows and approvals, or you can just have report statuses that are going to control who is able to make updates and when throughout the forecast process. And then how could that be audited and restored to a previous version? So we had showed the audit log. So this is always going to be available and continuously updated as information is written back. And then additionally, if you would like to have a snapshot or be able to restore to a previous version prior to making the switch from the, like you had said, from one line to another, you could simply create a new version of the data. So maybe we have our analysts that put in their first estimate of this forecast, and then we want to take a copy of that so that it is going to be maintained. And then we can make the Power BI user group final version. So it's all going to come down to version management and what you want that process to look like, but there are many different ways to accomplish that. And then do the power on visuals manage RLS based on the data model. Yep, so that's what we are doing here. Like I said, this visual is kind of like a walking, breathing insert, update, delete statement. So we can make those updates or have these checkboxes lead to any stored procedures or triggers that you might want to take place. So that does require some backend configuration if you want to use us to update role level security, or of course you can do it as you do today, and it will still pass through when using our visuals within a Power BI report. Okay, you showed a screen with a slicer of the price, but how does it handle each product with different prices? All right, so if we go to this example, we were looking at just quantities. So when we talk about pricing, here's an example where we're looking at the same product groups and brands, but we're looking at our total quantity for the year, and then that is going to be multiplied by our average sales price here, gets us to sales, and then we have discount amount and cost of goods sold subtracted to get us to our margin. So I haven't used that report in a bit. I'm going to give it a refresh, but ultimately we can see each of these products has a different price. And then in the case that I want to figure out how to get to a new margin or something like that, you can use the goal seek. So again, it's all simplistic measures here. Quantity times price equals sales minus discount minus cost of goods sold. It's a pretty simple arithmetic, but then you can use our product if you want to figure out, for example, I want to get my margin from 109 to 115 million. Maybe I don't see us selling more than 38 million units for this individual product. So I might want to hit set goal seek on my price, come over here, change that to 115. Hit save changes, and then taking these other variables into account, the matrix will figure out what my price should be to get to that margin. And then next question is going to be, could the scenarios be managed for the same period, but by different analysts, e.g. FY budget by analyst A, B, etc.? Yeah, absolutely. So some groups might want to, in most cases, the production level reports, your forecasts and budgets that are going out on a regular basis, one budget per year, and then the different forecasts, which are typically monthly at this point. Typically, there will be one version for each of those that many end users will contribute to, but some groups will want to use individual versions for users. So once again, I'll pull up an example on the side here. So this is a report where they wanted to do just that. Analysts have their own version that they can make changes to. So just like in some of the other versions that I showed, you can take a copy or edit versions. If I want to take a copy of someone else's version as a starting point, I can come to this page. Let's say I'm going to take our budget for 2023, insert, use that as a source version. I want to create my own forecast. I'll give this a name, Evan Forecast. So now I'll get my own version that is going to be based on that budget version as a starting point. And if I go back to the previous screen, I will be able to submit that to my manager for approval. So I just created this version. If I want to, of course, I can go in and edit that however I might want to. So if I just want to make an overarching change, we had the last couple months in spring there, I could say maybe I just want to increase this by 20%, whatever that may be, any changes that I want to make there. And then save changes. Once that's complete, I'll head back to the homepage and I will submit that to my manager for approval. So if you want many different people to be able to manage, create their own scenarios, you can do so in that way. So there's my Evan forecast, and then I can send for approval. I might want to say budget 2023 plus 20%. And then if I scroll over on that version name, we can see it was created by me right about now, and then I was submitted, and then somebody else with different permissions will be able to come in and approve that. All right, next question, and then consolidate into a master budget scenario. So yes, exactly. So as I had showed in the merging versions example over here, you can use multiple versions. So this one just takes the first 3 months. Or what I did here was take the first 3 months of our actuals that have occurred already, but you can do the same thing where you can select from multiple scenarios and then just have the sum of those populate the next version. And then can you block certain users to make changes to specific scenarios? Yeah, so depending on, I think that would be a similar question or answered similarly as we did over here, where different Active Directory groupings or by individual employees, you can change the read and write access based on the version status. So that's going to have a trigger that is based on the status column here, and then what is input there is going to dictate who does and doesn't have read and write access based on that status. As I found a little hard to set up the database to make the writeback, it's not easy. Should that task be performed by the IT department? Yeah, so whenever you are actually going through the installation of our product, the web service either has to be installed within an Azure tenant or on an IaaS server that lives within your company's firewall. So you should always have IT because they have the proper permissions as well as the technical know-how to set up that type of thing. So IT will typically be involved. And of course, they usually want to when introducing new technology into your internal environment as well. So I would say it's pretty important to include IT if you are onboarding with our product. Can you make a visual combining actuals and budget to show variances? Yeah, I'm not sure if that was made, or if that question was asked before I went over this, but in the same way that we compare our January and February version of our forecast here, of course, you could be able to do the same thing with actuals as well as your budgets. And then this one has another example that I will pull up off to the side here. So whenever you're talking about the variance reporting side of things, it is going to be primarily standard Power BI functionality. But let me get this over here. So if I scroll down here, you can see we have many different variance metrics that's going to show up in a standard matrix visual right below the data entry matrix that we can update. So here you can see quantity of last year, quantity versus last year to see the difference, the percentage difference from last year. So all of these things can be set up with standard Power BI visuals and measures. And then the Power On is just the data entry layer up here. And of course, these would update as we make changes to the figures that they're being compared with. Last question that I see here is how do you handle the forecast in the background if we have a matrix visual by month, but our fact table granularity is by day? The forecast gets planned by day or month. So when we're making changes with the data entry matrix on the backend database, that fact table, the values are getting updated to the lowest level of granularity that exists within the fact table. So the presentation layer may not look like that, but for example, let's go back to this data entry matrix example. So I might be updating thousands of transactions whenever I make an update to one of these figures. And just to give you a feel for what that looks like, if we want to plan at a higher level, let's say I just want to plan by my quarters and brands. So rather than having the months and then the products rolling up into the brands, I can just say I want to do 50 million in Q1 for my Apple brands. Hit Save Changes, and then once that save is complete, I'll go back to the other view that we were looking at before, and you'll see that it has allocated down across the lower levels of granularity. They're just not visualized in the way that visual is set up. Alrighty, so I think we are good for the questions now. I can continue to go through a couple more examples, and then we'll save the last 15, 20 minutes or so for any other questions that come up. So we went through a couple FP&A examples. We can also touch on a sales and operational planning example. So data entry matrix doesn't always have to be updating, or I'm sorry, we can have different calculations that live within the data entry matrix. So this is a report that's going to allow us to update the demand quantity that we are expecting for certain product catalogs. We can include discount quantity and discount percentages if we would like to, as well as the supply quantity. And then all these are just going to be dependent calculations based on the updates that we're making, but they will be read only. So I'm not going to be able to just go in and update my total sales because that's going to be based off of our demand quantity and the discount amount that's been applied. So if I come in, for example, we can also see that this green line is showing us our balance. And then we have the gray showing us the demand contrasting with supply. So maybe I get a large order that's set to take place in a few months, and I'm going to have to change my October demand quantity from 75 to 100. Hit Save Changes. Of course, all these dependent calculations will update based off of that. And then with the visualization that is possible with the standard Power BI visual, it will become abundantly clear that we have a problem now because my projected demand is out or is larger than my projected supply and opening inventory combined in that case. Now I can see my inventory and a business is going to be -14 for November, -9. So maybe I want to leave a comment here and mention our supply team. Are you able to increase production by 20 units? So that is a demand planning example. This one is a pretty complex example that is a master production scheduling. So similarly, we're going to have our projected inventory, what we expect to get for orders, and then MPS is how much we plan on producing, and then capacity is actually going to take in each packaging line's operational efficiency and how much we are going to ask them to produce across our different product lines to show us what level they're going to be operating at. So we're okay with the values in 90, but our over rates right here we can see are going to be values that are approaching 100 or above that. So again, we have these standard visuals to highlight when a problem is going to occur. Over here, I can look at our input details. And this is where you can do the master data management associated with assigning products to packaging lines, as well as the operational efficiency of those product lines and any downtime that we might want to be able to plan for. And then within capacity allocation, if I'd like to, I can go through and assign these products to different packaging lines. So pretty complex sales and operational planning example there. Sometimes groups have this covered within their ERP, but we do have quite a few folks that have benefited from doing this type of thing as well. And then here is one more just to show the flexibility of the iterations or the granularity that we want to plan at. All of our examples to this point has been planning on a monthly basis, but a lot of times people will want to use our tool for their short-term shelf life planning, things that they can't plan for on a monthly basis because that's too long, or for long range planning, 5 to 10 years out, because a lot of times those processes don't easily fit into an existing application of theirs. It's hard to make them flexible enough to do so. But of course, when using us, it's just like Power BI, where you can choose, as long as you have the data available, what time series you want to look at that for. So we have our dates here rather than doing months, quarters, or years. And same thing, we have the calculations, how much inventory we expect to have on hand, demand, how much we're going to produce, and then how much inventory we have at the end. This time we're just doing so on a daily basis. So we've gone through a lot of planning, mostly budgeting, forecasting, product-based or good-based planning, but it really can be done for any type of planning. And I think this is a good example of that, where this is a resource allocation dashboard, where again, we have standard visuals and dashboards to see where problems might be occurring. In this case, I can see that one of our resources, Hippolito, is overassigned. He's got 47 hours in week 7, and he's got 43 in week 8. So of course, we only want him going up to 40 hours and not surpassing that. So if I go over to our matrix visual where you can update this data, I can come down and see the different resources that are working on that same project. And then I can compare Hippolito. We can see, as we did on the previous screen, he's got 47 and 43 hours. I can see he's putting quite a bit of time towards his planning. On the other hand, Gonzalo has plenty of free time on his hands, so I might want to reallocate those hours to him. So then a Hippolito, maybe I want to do decrease by 10, decrease by 5, and then do the opposite for Gonzalo. Increase 10, increase 5. Of course, I could leave comments at those data points to explain what I was doing there. But once I am able to commit that save and we're notified that it's been complete, then we can head back over to the reporting page and double check that to make sure that the problem has been solved. All right, and then those were quite a few different planning examples. I'll wrap things up from a demo perspective with some simplistic custom applications. So we already showed this one, which shows you the ability to add comments and status updates to a standard visual here. I'd say for the table editor, not necessarily planning cases, but very common use cases for it include exception reporting and data management. So an exception reporting example is any report that is meant to identify a data-driven unfavorable variance of some sort. So this is an example where a procurement team wanted to better understand why their contracts were going overdue and not being updated by their due date. So now Kristen, maybe she is a procurement officer, she's able to filter down to all of the purchase orders that she is responsible for that haven't been updated. Using the table editor, attach an image feature, she's even able to take a look at an image of that PO directly within the application. And these first 7 columns come directly from several different ERP systems, so they are not editable. And then we have these columns which are editable using Power On and don't even exist within the ERP system. These live in a database and then it's matched back together with this ID. But long story short, Kristen is now responsible for attributing a reason code. So a finite set of options that management has narrowed it down as the top reasons for these variances occurring. And then they're able to report in real time on the total contract value being held up by each reason code to better guide those continuous improvement efforts. And commentary and description are free text entry. And last but not least, we have this checkbox, which allows us to mark it complete within Power BI. And you can see in this case, it is labeled send email. So our product doesn't do email notifications out of the box, but many groups will use database mail or Power Automate, with us as the data entry layer being the first domino. For example, when send email is checked, that can be used as a true/false statement. When true, Kristen's manager will get an email letting her know that's been updated. And then last one I'll touch on, I mentioned data management. So especially for companies that go through mergers and acquisitions, sometimes just getting new product SKUs or service lines mapped correctly to the reporting hierarchies can be a cumbersome task that involves cooperation from quite a few different people. So that was definitely the case at an oil company that uses this product, where they would go through an acquisition and have a new product SKU like a Z-type hydraulic fishing jar part, which the finance and BI teams were responsible for mapping, and they don't really know what that means. So in their case, the guy that does know where that should belong is a product line manager, and he works out in the field on a oil field all day with a hard hat on. So it was pretty hard to get this information from him. He frankly didn't understand why it was important. And they had a 3-year problem where following an acquisition, their data would be flying all over the place. Now Glenn comes in once a week, uses this table editor application, and he knows off the top of his head or knows how to find this information quite quickly for where these belong from these various different reporting hierarchies. Then he can send that back to the finance and BI folks for review. Alrighty, so that is hopefully gave you a good feel for the art of the possible. We covered Visual Planner 101 just to give a feel for the data entry matrix, the drag and drop visuals that you can use, as well as the table editor for more row by row transactional updates. Then we got into some more of the finished products, looking at FP&A planning examples, budgeting and forecasting or P&L, and then some of the sales and operational planning examples as well, and finished up with the last few custom applications there. So with that said, we can take another look at the chat to see if there's some more questions, and please feel free to add any last minute ones before we wrap up for the day.
Sorry, I had a short connection issue on my end, but I think everything worked. I think there's the question of all questions, the pricing theme.
Of course. So we probably won't go into pricing, details today, but I will throw my email in this chat here. We can set up some time to go over that specifically, but as far as a high-level pricing model, there's 2 types of end users that require a Power On license. Those are what we call contributors, which is any end user that comes in and makes an update using a custom visual. And then you have your modelers, which are going to be your Power BI developers that develop reports today that you would like to give access to our custom visuals here. So most groups will start with a couple modelers as well as a handful of end users for their first pilot application or something like that. But you have the report developers and then you have the end users. And then those licenses can be named, concurrent, seasonal, or enterprise licenses. And like I said, if you want to get deeper into the pricing, I threw my email in the chat box, so please feel free to reach out if you'd like to set up some time to go through that.
Thank you. Yeah, so there's also some people joining later with the recording, so it will be available on YouTube. You will find the link also on Meetup. But let me also share the YouTube channel. I think Arthur already did it before, maybe for those who joined later. So just subscribe to this channel there. You will also find the recording in the next days. Yeah. So any other questions from the chat? Otherwise, everyone's muted. Yeah, thank you, Evan, for this presentation. Really cool use cases. So I definitely also see, yeah, will kind of show it in my company, because I definitely see the benefits there. It definitely is what you mentioned with supercharging Power BI. So because it adds really a new layer of working with the data. And currently, I think it's in a lot of companies that a lot of these things are done with Excel. And then yeah, you kind of, I don't know, have a data flow or something, or maybe with Power Automate some things that you combine them, but definitely not. There's a benefit of having it all in one tool. So totally agree there, and yeah, that was cool to see.
Fantastic.
And also
Great
a
to
lot of
hear.
use cases you showed. So there's a lot of resource planning, resource allocation, things like that, commenting. So really a very powerful tool, it seems.
For sure, and I think one of the best parts about it is, anybody that is already good at Power BI knows about 80 to 90% of what they need to do, and you can accomplish that many different things. So just being able to really capitalize and continue to improve on a single skill set, but cater to quite a few different things there.
Yes, great. I think no more questions. Last chance. But yeah, so thanks again. Anything else you want to say or show?
I think I'm all demoed out myself, but I appreciate you all taking the time with me today. And, getting familiar with the tool set. Really just wanted to kind of share some of the ideas that we've been working with. And of course, please feel free to check out our website, which you can see here, poweronbi.com. And I also threw my email in the chat box. So please feel free to reach out if there's anything you guys have additional questions about or want to talk through more so.
Great. Yeah. Then again, for those who joined later, recording will be available sometime next week. Give me a bit of time to check because someone said there was a sound issue or something. Let's see. I will go through this. Yeah. So thank you, Evan, for this great presentation. And then I think I wish everyone a nice evening or a nice, what is it now in New York City? Lunchtime or afternoon.
Yeah.
Yeah, or wherever people are joining from. So have a great day.
Thanks so much, Chris and Arter. Take care, everybody.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.